Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you. I was worried that they wouldn't bring that story out, and I wanted to make sure that I did full disclosure. And of course, I also appreciate the Seattle-like weather during the last couple of days. Let me give you a perspective from a police chief's point of view. First of all, you have to understand that the position of police chief is not, whether it's Ray Kelly, the police commissioner, great police commissioner in New York City, myself or others, we all actually worked our way up through the ranks. A puff of white smoke didn't emanate from City Hall, and suddenly we became anointed with these positions. All of us worked as police officers and detectives and sergeants, etc. So we kind of understand some of the nitty-gritty, although the television shows here in New York are so much better. The right, Seattle, we'd have latte stories or something, but the right to own and possess a gun in this country isn't a debatable issue, and it's not the topic. Reasonableness, though, and common sense do come into play. I'm not a researcher, and I am certainly not going to play a researcher for this debate tonight, but I do want to cite a couple things because it provides a framework for you, but it also puts into my perspective 36 years of law enforcement experience. And this is work done by Phil Cook. So the rates of assault, robbery, and rape will not noticeably be affected by more guns. Increase in the secondary market of guns will occur. What is it in the secondary market? Loans to and from family members of firearms, off-the-book sales, meaning that there was no background check, thefts of guns, of which was mentioned, I am personally familiar with. The percent of suicide with guns is highly correlated with the prevalence of gun ownership, and the murder rate in large counties is closely linked to gun prevalence. An increase in the gun murder rate would be expected, but there was no effect on the non-gun murder rate. So you're going to hear from the other side about the deterrence effect, and in fact, John already brought a little bit about that up. More people carrying more guns will deter criminals. In other words, the criminals will think twice before confronting a potential victim. I wish criminals were that smart. On the other hand, I'm really glad that they're not that smart because that's why we catch so many of them all the time. Since we have almost in the neighborhood of 240 million guns in the United States, I would think that these criminals would already get the message that there are a lot of guns out there and that if deterrence was in fact carried through, that we would have seen it by now, but we haven't. The other side of this coin is, will more armed citizens have an opposite effect on criminals? In other words, are the criminals going to now arm themselves, thinking that more and more and more people are carrying guns? Well, the union that represents the British bobbies, who have been unarmed since Sir Robert Peel founded them, their union went forward and said, look, we do not want to be armed as bobbies in the UK. Now, this was during a time of significant increases in crime, increases in knife crime, which is still going on, but they ask not to be armed. Now, there are some specialized units, certainly, called armed response cars, etc. But for the vast majority of the bobbies in all of the UK, they are not armed, and they don't want to be because, one, they think it will only increase assaults on themselves, and that it will be a tit-for-tat or a proliferation of guns in the UK, which, like rabies, they have very few of. Who is carrying a gun now in this country, in the United States? Well, of course, law enforcement officers, state, federal, local, and security guards across all walks of life, from banks to armored car services, literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that are already carrying guns. And then there's a whole other group of people, and those are the people that are able to go into their states and ask for a concealed firearms permit. There is a background check. It depends on the state on what's done. But essentially, they say, look, I sell jewelry, or I have a business that's been robbed, or, you know what, I want to be able to carry a gun, like in Florida. And they'll be able to carry a firearm as a concealed firearm. Here's the big unknown. Here's where research has not actually answered this question. all of these hundreds of thousands of cops out there and security guards and citizens who have concealed firearms permits, how many are actually carrying a gun? They may have the permits, they may have the authority. When you're a new police officer, you're usually armed to the teeth, and within a few days or months or years or whatever, you oftentimes don't carry the gun. It used to be that you were required in police departments across the country to be armed whenever you were out and about, off duty or on. Very few departments have those rules anymore because the gun is difficult to conceal, it is uncomfortable, and it is difficult to secure. So when we think of all the people that are actually out there, how many are actually armed? We don't know. Now, whenever somebody gives you a simple solution to a complex problem, we all know that you can be assured of one thing: it's wrong. And so after all of the different campus shootings that we have talked about and read about just recently, of course, in Arkansas, we hear this hue and cry, well, the students should be armed, or the students and the faculty should be armed. And the outcome, as one academic told me, there is one sure outcome of arming the college students, and that would be grade inflation. The last thing that I'll mention, let me close with this. Let me close with this. When I was a young officer, working the street in St. Petersburg, retired people, a lot of them from New York, in fact, a young woman, 15 years old, intoxicated, beating and beating and beating on the front door of an elderly couple who had no phone. They became more and more and more afraid, but she had been there beating on the door. He turned to the thing that he felt could protect him the most, even though she was unable, of course, to get in, and she was just really an intoxicated kid who beating on the front door. He fired through the door and struck her, a girl about the age that his granddaughter could or would have been. And I remember going to the hospital and seeing her there, and I remember that family that lived, that husband and wife in St. Petersburg for many, many years. There are lots of cases in which these guns could protect you. There are far more cases in which the gun does not. Thank you.